I'm not the type to believe in monsters or any of that nonsense. At least I wasn't until a couple years back when things took a really weird turn. I'm a surveyor by trade. I was out in the thick of the Colorado wilderness marking boundaries for a client looking to build. Beautiful country, but damned lonely, miles from any kind of civilization. I remember it being a day like any other, clear skies and a slight chill in the air. That day I was mapping out the south section of the client's property. I always enjoyed working that area. It offered great views, a lively creek, and the sound of birds trilling in the distance. The landscape was a mix of rolling meadows and dense pine forests, untouched and pristine. The seclusion didn't bother me. It gave me peace, a chance to get away from the usual city noise. It felt like my own slice of paradise, which was probably why I was caught so off guard when the day took a drastic turn. Honestly, I wasn't looking for anything out of the ordinary that day, just doing my job with my head stuck in data and measurements. But as dusk fell, that's when it started. I remember a smell, like rotting meat, stomach turning even for a guy who'd worked around roadkill before. It wasn't until I was deep in the forest a good 2 miles from my truck that the smell really hit me. It was putrid, as if the entire ecosystem was rotting away. My first thought was, maybe a bear had taken down something big like an elk, and I just stumbled into the aftermath. But this was something else, something I couldn't quite place. I felt it in the pit of my stomach, a warning sign of some sort. The normal hum of the forest seemed to quiet down, as if the birds and bugs were reacting to the same gut-wrenching odor. It was at that point I realized this wasn't just another day at work. Something was off, very off. Then in the failing light I saw something big, 9 feet tall, easy. I thought it was a dead tree at first, a really gnarly one. But trees don't change their location. And this thing did. It had the legs of an elk, long and sturdy, but something was horribly wrong. The skin was hanging off like it was rotting away. As my eyes adjusted to the encroaching darkness, I tried to make sense of the figure in the distance. At first it seemed to blend with the trees, so tall and skeletal. The antlers made it seem like a bizarre, grotesque statue, an artifact of nature worn by time and weather. I saw the flesh hanging loosely from its frame, revealing a skeletal structure beneath. It was as if the animal had been dead for months and was just an upright carcass. That's when a chilling gust of wind brought another wave of that terrible smell, and the creature shifted on its elk-like legs. I watched as this nightmarish figure detached from the tree line and moved towards me, becoming horribly real. The head is what really got me. Like a deer skull, antlers and all, but with 2 empty holes where the eyes should have been. Except they weren't empty. They were glowing, flickering between this unnatural yellow and an angry burning red. I remember the feeling of my heart thumping against my ribs as I watched this thing, this impossible creature, turn its head towards me. The skull-like face was a horrifying sight. The antlers added a certain sinister elegance, but those empty eye sockets, they were something straight out of a horror movie. Suddenly they lit up, first a piercing yellow illuminating the surrounding woods with a sickly glow. Then they switched to a malevolent red, casting an unsettling hue onto the decaying flesh that hung off its body. The sight of those shifting lights where eyes should have been, that's what kick-started my adrenaline and jolted me out of my stupor. What could I do? I was in shock and couldn't move. Then when the shock wore off, I ran. I didn't stop till I hit my truck, locked the doors, turned the key, and got the hell out of there. Never been so scared in my life. My work for that client, unfinished, and I never went back for it. Since then, I've been a changed man. I now keep a close watch on my surroundings. So make this a note to you too. Be aware. Because if there's something like that out there, who knows what else might be hiding in the shadows. Ever since that night, I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, both in the wilderness and in the city. I try to convince myself it was just a hallucination, a trick of the light, but the memory is too vivid, too real. I've started studying local wildlife, trying to match what I saw to some known creature, but nothing fits. I've taken up self-defense classes, even bought myself a sturdy hunting knife, just in case. I can't escape the feeling that I've seen something unnatural, something unexplained. It's taught me that the world is a lot bigger and stranger than we think, and that there are still mysteries out there waiting to be discovered, even if they're the kind you'd rather never encounter. My name is Blake, and I want to tell you about an incredible encounter I had in Yosemite National Park. I had been on a hiking and camping vacation with my family. It was a yearly event for us. This year was Yosemite, and a sunny morning the day that this happened. We had started our hike from a trailhead at the base of the mountains. I remember that the air was fresh, and the sound of chirping birds filled the air. We followed a winding trail that led us deeper into the heart of the park. At one point, as we made our way up a steep path, my eyes were darting everywhere. I was always on the lookout for any signs of animals and anything out of the ordinary, but little did I know that I was about to encounter something truly extraordinary. With all my excitement, I was in the lead and moving more quickly than the rest of the group, by quite a bit of distance. At one point, I reached a clearing, and I started walking to the center. While I was making my way there, I glanced across the clearing towards the trees on the other side, and suddenly I froze in my tracks. Standing behind one of the trees, about 50 feet away from me, was a creature that resembled a human, but one that was covered in hair. It was enormous, and as I looked, I could see the face of a dog and shaggy brown fur and long muscular arms. But its eyes were wide and curious, and it stood on two legs just like a human. At first, fear washed over me, and my body felt like it was glued to the ground. But as I studied the creature, I realized that it didn't seem aggressive or dangerous. In fact, it looked just as surprised to see me as I was to see it. The encounter lasted for what felt like an eternity, but it was probably only a few minutes. We stood there, locked in a gaze, as if trying to understand each other. As I stood there staring at the creature in awe and disbelief, I couldn't help but notice its immense size. It must have been at least 8 feet tall, towering over me like a giant. Its body was covered in thick, dark brown fur, which blended perfectly with the surrounding trees and foliage. Its muscular arms hung down by its sides, almost touching the ground. At first, my heart raced with fear. The stories I had heard about Bigfoot creatures flashed through my mind. But as I observed the creature more closely, I noticed that it had a gentle expression in its large almond-shaped eyes. It seemed curious, rather than threatening. The creature took a step forward, cautiously closing the distance between us. I held my breath, unsure of how it would react. To my surprise, it didn't move any closer. Instead, it stood there, tilting its head slightly as if trying to understand my presence. Feeling a mixture of fear and fascination, I decided to take a small step backward, hoping to create some distance between us. To my relief, the creature mirrored my movement, showing no signs of aggression. It was as if it understood my intentions and didn't want to scare me away. We continued this slow dance, taking turns stepping back and observing each other. It was a surreal experience, like being part of a silent conversation between two beings from different worlds. I felt a sense of connection, a bond formed through our mutual curiosity. Time seemed to stand still as we remained locked in our gaze. The forest around us was hushed, as if holding its breath, creating an atmosphere of enchantment and mystery. It felt like I had entered a different realm, a place where mythical creatures roamed freely. Despite the fear still lingering within me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of joy and wonder. I was witnessing something extraordinary, a moment that most people could only dream of. But as much as I wanted to stay and delve deeper into the encounter, a part of me knew it was time to retreat. With a final glance at the creature, I slowly turned around, my heart pounding in my chest. I made my way back to where my family was still working their way up the trail, my mind racing with a mix of emotions. I couldn't wait to share my encounter with them, to describe in vivid detail what I had just experienced. They could see the truth in my eyes. I recounted every detail, from the creature's appearance to our silent communication. They listened intently, hanging on to every word. Some were amazed, while others remained skeptical. Then, as a group, we all continued back up to the clearing, but despite all of us looking around, we found no further signs of the creature. The rest of the day passed by in a blur, a mix of breathtaking scenery and laughter with my family. We concluded our hike as planned, reaching our campsite just as the sun began to set. Emotionally, each family member had a different response to my unexpected encounter. Some felt a sense of wonder and gratitude, while others felt a lingering unease, a reminder of the unknown lurking within the depths of the forest. But we all agreed that it was a day we would never forget. And for me, a day that had affected me deeper than I ever could have imagined. It's taken me a while to gather my thoughts and get them onto paper, but here we are. My garage door, a solid metal structure that could withstand the wildest of storms, is now severely damaged, bearing gashes so deep and wide it's as though a wrecking ball took to it. And the stench that pervades the area, it's like the dank, decaying scent of a stagnant swamp mixed with something far more foul. So, here's how it all happened. A couple of weeks back, peculiar signs began appearing around my property. I found muddy footprints, each larger than my own foot, circling the perimeter of the house. But the most unsettling were the ones found near the creek, where I often go to fish. The prints were similar to those of an alligator, only much larger and significantly deeper, suggesting a hefty creature. It was a typical afternoon when I returned home from work at the local hardware store in town. My house is tucked at the end of a winding gravel road, surrounded by a dense green forest. It's typically a tranquil spot, the silence broken only by the harmonious symphony of nature crickets, birds, the rustle of leaves. But that evening, an unnatural hum in the air. As the day turned into evening, I went outside to pull my car into the garage. I had parked it closer to the front door when I originally got home. As I drove towards the garage, the headlights cast a pool of light around the area, and soon I heard an ominous sound echoing through the night. The sound of breaking twigs, but not the kind a rabbit or deer would make. This was something heavier, bigger. I stopped the car to listen better and then turned around to look towards the forest. That's when I came face to face with the unimaginable. There it was, a creature standing tall, a staggering 8 feet at least. Its body was upright like a human's, but the way it moved was anything but. Its movements were jerky, graceless, and a grotesque parody of a human gait. The glare from the rear lights caught its eyes, yellow, piercing, gleaming with a malicious intent. The look in its eyes was cold, calculated, and terrifyingly intelligent. The eyes held an evil that spoke volumes just from its gaze. It was then that the creature moved into the light, and I saw it in full. Its face resembled that of a giant crocodile or alligator, complete with a broad, hardened snout and an array of sharp, menacing teeth. Its skin was a sickly gray-green, textured like rough scales, glistening wetly in the light. Powerful muscles rippled under the skin, hinting at the strength it possessed. I hit the gas pedal and drove into the garage, clicking the button to close the garage door behind me. I watched and held my breath as the door safely went down. And only then did I dare look out the door's top windows. But before I was able to make anything out, without warning, it lunged at the closed garage door. The impact was loud, the reverberation echoing in the enclosed space as the creature continued its relentless assault. I stumbled backwards, my heart pounding as the door began to buckle under its force. I could hear the metal shrieking, an insane symphony of destruction that drowned out all other sounds. Suddenly it stopped. It wasn't because the door had given in or that the creature had tired. No, it stopped of its own accord, as though it had made its point. It gave a low, guttural growl, a chilling sound that resonated in the silent night. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the creature turned and disappeared into the dark woods. I'm sharing this with you because I can't explain it. I can't dismiss it as a prank or a trick of the light. This encounter was as real as it gets. There's something out there, something we have no knowledge of or defense against, something we're not ready to face. I'm a park ranger stationed at Yellowstone National Park. I moved out here about 6 years ago from Seattle, looking for a change of pace. The nature, the peace, it's all fantastic. But something happened a few days ago that's got me questioning the tranquility of my job. I was out late one night checking for any signs of wildfires, a typical part of my duties. That night, the dry wind was stronger than usual, an unfortunate sign of potential wildfire activity. I'd taken the ATV out for a more extensive coverage of the area. There had been a lightning storm earlier in the day, and I needed to ensure that no rogue strikes had started a fire. I had reached the northern boundary of my patrol route, a place dense with pines and rarely visited by park-goers, when I first picked up on that disturbing scent. As I was making my rounds, I noticed an unusual scent in the air. I'm used to the smell of damp earth, pine needles, and wildlife, but this was different. It was pungent with an acrid undertone that reminded me of burnt matches or sulfur. It was then I heard a noise, not your standard nighttime rustlings or distant wolf howls. It was a guttural growl. My first reaction was to radio in some kind of animal disturbance, but as I fumbled for my walkie-talkie, a low growl rippled through the air, causing the hairs on the back of my neck to stand. It was a sound that seemed to vibrate in my very bones, almost as if the creature was more beast than the natural world could contain. I instinctively held my breath, my hand tightening around the flashlight. The rustle of the leaves around me seemed to cease, as if the very forest was holding its breath in anticipation. I turned my flashlight towards the sound and froze. There, standing on human-like legs, was this creature. It was massive, easily over 8 feet tall, with a large chest and wide shoulders. Its back was humped in a way that reminded me of a hyena or some type of canine. Its fur was an unsettling mixture of black, brown, and patches of gray. The creature's face was truly chilling. It had a long snout filled with a double row of sharp, menacing teeth. The fangs were clear as my light reflected off them. Its ears were pointed, and the eyes, they were filled with an intelligent but terrifyingly demonic expression. The beam of my flashlight played over its monstrous form, the light seeming to be swallowed by the dark hues of its fur. Its eyes, glinting in the light, held a predatory intelligence that sent shivers down my spine. I could see the muscles under its fur ripple as it moved, a horrifying display of raw power. Its long snout twitched, the double row of teeth glistening wetly as if it had recently eaten. And those eyes, they seemed to look right through me, as though it was calculating, deciding what to do with this sudden interruption of its night. The encounter was like a fever dream. My blood ran cold, and every instinct told me to flee, but I was paralyzed with fear. The creature maintained its low growl, and for a few tense moments, we just stared at each other. The fear traveling through me was unlike anything I've ever felt. You hear about fight or flight instincts, but in this moment, I was paralyzed by the sight of this creature. My mind was racing to comprehend what I was witnessing, trying to reconcile the reality before me with my understanding of the natural world. The creature didn't move, maintaining its growl. We were locked in a terrifying stalemate, the hunter and the hunted assessing each other in a silent confrontation. Suddenly it reared up on its hind legs, let out a howl that echoed through the trees, and then bolted into the darkness. I stood there, still in shock, until the creature's howls faded and the oppressive smell lessened. Once I snapped back to my senses, I quickly made my way back to my vehicle, feeling a mixture of fear and relief. Back at the station, I locked all the doors and spent the night jumping at every sound. As I sat in my locked vehicle, I couldn't help replaying the encounter over and over in my mind. Each growl, the terrifying visage of the creature, its intense eyes, all felt etched into my memory. I spent the night in restless anticipation, jumping at every small sound outside, my eyes straining to penetrate the darkness outside the windows. The adrenaline wouldn't leave my system, leaving me in a state of heightened anxiety that made every shadow a potential threat. I felt a raw vulnerability, a realization that there were things out there in the night, things we aren't prepared to face. The next day, I went back to the location, trying to convince myself that it was just a bear, a trick of the light. but the sulfuric smell still lingered, and there were tracks unlike any I've seen before. That's when I realized I couldn't explain this away. It wasn't a bear or any other animal I'm familiar with. This was something different, something not of our usual understanding of wildlife. I haven't told my colleagues about this yet. I'm still trying to make sense of it all. Let me know if you'd like more details. I've got the whole encounter burned into my memory. Park rangers are experiencing bizarre, unexplainable phenomena. Some deem it as supernatural, while others see it as unexplainable. The first story I'm going to share highlights just some of the mystery. This story was submitted to me by a gentleman who referred to himself as Jason. Jason went on to tell me in his email that this occurred between 2005 and 2009 in a national park. He wished and requested to remain anonymous, but informed me that it's okay to tell you that it is in the northwest section of the United States. What's interesting about Jason's story is that he brings forth information about a search and rescue mission. They found a body about 40 feet up in a pine tree with wounds that were physically impossible for a bear to make. However, it was written down as a bear kill. After all, bears attacking and killing humans isn't necessarily new. But to write off these bizarre events as a simple bear kill, something just isn't adding up. Jason explained that for a while now, months before this even happened, he and his colleagues were hearing and experiencing strange things all around the park. They witnessed mysterious phenomena, mysterious black apparitions appearing out of the corner of their eyes, and strange lights and sounds appearing all over the park at all times of the day. But when you're on a job like that, you don't talk about it at work. Also, it's not something you're going to outright report to your superiors, and for good reason. For a while now, visitors across the park had been complaining about strange, disturbing noises, from humans screaming and yelling to strange, unexplainable animal sounds, all coming from the backcountry area of the forest in the park. But when the noises were investigated by rangers and staff personnel, there was no trace of anything, from tracks to any evidence of anybody being back there. It's as if these sounds simply manifested on their own and vanished when anybody would inspect what was happening. Apparently, some of Jason's closest colleagues and people he worked with had some strange experiences while in this small section of the backwoods. Although they refused to talk about it every time it was brought up. If the subject came up, they seemed to go pale and act scared, as if they knew something but were too afraid to talk about it. Now, this puzzled Jason. Remember that these particular events I'm now explaining happened before the search and rescue, where the body was found and subsequently labeled as a bear kill. Other reports had come in that Jason dealt with personally. He also heard about how in these backcountry sites, food and supplies were being taken, but it was easily written off because animals can steal food and supplies, and the human noises or sounds could easily be written off and explained as foxes and mountain lions at night. Then Jason goes on to tell of a more harrowing experience. This was, of course, after the search and rescue find of the body. Some personnel were growing concerned because they believed they had a bear accustomed to human food on their hands, and that would only prove to be dangerous. However, upon venturing back further, they found what appeared to be a den of some kind, and not that of a bear. One of Jason's closest colleagues also reported strange sounds like a mechanical humming in the woods right near where this den was. It was around this same den where he spotted strange tracks that he could not quite identify. In fact, they looked more akin to that of a goat track, but did not resemble any animal he is familiar with. For the following few days to come, they would spend time hiking throughout this small valley, and a bizarre, pervasive odor of death would always follow suit. In the same evening, while they were camping out in this small valley, they experienced a series of strange events that would occur over the course of the night. One of them reported strange whispers and hushed tones right near the tent, along with some strange gurgling noises. As Jason recalls, one of these park rangers ventured out beyond the reaches of his tent and the safety of the flashlight. Armed with a rifle, he set out to investigate the source of these strange noises. There was some moonlight giving brief illumination to the area around him, and as he could see off into the woods. He was shining and scanning with his flashlight, but he didn't capture anything. But there were a few moments where he swore that he could see a very tall, skinny silhouette watching him from the tree line, a silhouette that unmistakably was not a bear in any way, shape, or form. What's also strange is the ever-pervading odor of death in this whole valley. The rangers who had made note of it noticed that any time the strange occurrences happened, whether it be sights or smells or phenomena, this odor of death would increase tenfold. They explained it to Jason, who related to me like this. Imagine standing next to a cow carcass that had been dead for 3 to 4 days, baking in the hot sun, enough to make you gag. But there's no visible source for this odor to be coming from, especially not as strong and as potent as this was. The following day, they all returned to the main portion of the camp with no signs or evidence to further validate what the source of the noises were. Now, according to Jason, this only complicated things more, as everybody was so perplexed at their findings. While everybody was creeped out, nobody was about to go ahead and point fingers at the boogeyman. You want to talk about keeping your credibility? That's not something you even hint at in a professional setting. What's also very interesting is that the same day in October, 2 hikers would end up missing around the same area where they heard those noises the previous night. Jason, who was now involved in a search party to try and find these 2 missing hikers, experienced a series of unexplainable events, sounds, and phenomena himself. These further validated the experiences of his 2 fellow colleagues just days before. While the 2 missing hikers were never found and are still considered several of the missing persons cases today, the experiences that Jason recalls were completely bone-chilling. This is beside the body that was found about 40 feet propped up into tree. They never could identify who the body belonged to, and there had been no reports in the general time frame of anybody gone missing. So the hiker was simply a Jane Doe. And in the end, this was yet another case written down as simply a bear kill. Even Jason, who had found the body originally, tried his best to rationalize the find as somebody having a very unfortunate run-in with a bear. But with how badly mangled this person was, which bears do not do, it did not line up with the way a bear kills. I'll let you guys be the judge on this story and let you speculate. Could this have been something supernatural? Does this have any connection at all to the thing chasing Jason at night or the experience the other 2 park rangers had in the valley? Or is this simply just a misidentification of an unfortunate individual being slaughtered by a bear? Those are just about all the details Jason gave me. So, I'd love to hear what you guys think. Was there something truly supernatural, or is there simply a way to rationally explain it all with critical thinking and real-life evidence?